They say you can't bury the past, but I spent 30 years proving them wrong. I buried it 3 feet deep in my own backyard, under a bed of blue hydrangeas that my wife Eleanor planted with hands that knew how to nurture life, even when that life was threatening to consume us. But today, the past is coming up for air. It is a humid Tuesday morning, the kind where the air feels heavy enough to crush you, pressing down on the back of your neck like a physical weight. I am kneeling in the dirt, the knees of my trousers soaked through with mud. I am Silas Vance. I am 78 years old. I used to be a professor of history, a man who could command a lecture hall of 300 students with nothing more than a whisper. Now, I am a nuisance in my own garden. My knees are screaming in protest, a sharp, grinding pain that shoots up my thighs with every movement of the garden spade. But I keep digging. I have to. The for sale sign planted aggressively on the front lawn casts a long, jagged shadow over the house I built with my first book advance, a shadow that feels like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. I can feel him watching me. I don't need to turn around to know that Michael is standing at the kitchen window, sipping my expensive coffee, shaking his head at the spectacle of his senile father playing in the mud. My son. He is 45 years old, a man who wears Italian suits paid for by credit cards he can't clear, a man who has failed at 2 marriages and 3 businesses, and who has now decided that his biggest asset is my death. He moved in 6 months ago, right after his second divorce was finalized. "I want to help you manage the estate, Dad," he had said, his voice dripping with false concern. The help was a lie. It started small, moving my keys so I couldn't find them, hiding my heart medication and then finding it hours later, scolding me for being careless, telling the neighbors I was losing my mind, that I was forgetting names, that I was a danger to myself. Gaslighting. It's a term my students used to use. I never thought I would experience it at the hands of the boy I taught to ride a bike. Yesterday, the mask slipped completely. He put the house on the market without my permission. He brought a realtor over while I was napping. "It's for your own good, Dad," he had said this morning, leaning against the counter while I ate my toast. "You can't manage the stairs anymore. I found a great facility, assisted living. It's already paid for." He thinks I am broken. He thinks I am a confused old man who will go quietly into the night. He thinks I have forgotten. But I remember 1995. I dig deeper. The soil is wet, heavy. My breathing is ragged. Clang. The sound of metal hitting metal echoes in the quiet garden. It is a sharp, dissonant note in the symphony of birdsong. I stop. I wipe the sweat from my forehead with the back of a muddy glove. I brush away the wet earth. It is there. The metal ammunition box Eleanor and I buried on our 25th anniversary. We told Michael it was a time capsule, a romantic gesture for the future. We told him it contained love letters and photographs. But Eleanor, God rest her soul, was a woman who prepared for war. She loved our son, but she saw him clearly. She saw the darkness that lived in his heart long before I was willing to admit it was there. She knew that one day, love wouldn't be enough. One day, we would need leverage. I pull the box out of the hole. It is heavy, rusted at the corners, caked in 30 years of mud. It feels cold against my hands, colder than the earth should be. The voice startles me. I flinch, nearly dropping the spade. Michael has come out onto the patio. He is wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of white wine, though it is not yet noon. He looks down at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Asks, swirling the wine, "Playing in the dirt again?" I turn my body, shielding the box with my torso. "Just gardening, Michael," I say. My voice is steady, betraying none of the pounding in my chest, saying goodbye to the hydrangeas. He laughs. It is a cruel, dry sound, like dead leaves skittering on pavement. Say goodbye quickly. The bulldozers are coming next week. The developers want to put a pool here. He takes a sip of wine, dismissing me. He doesn't see the box. He doesn't see the rust on my gloves. He sees a harmless old fool saying goodbye to flowers. "Don't stay out too long," he calls over his shoulder as he walks back inside. "The agent is coming at 1. The sliding glass door clicks shut. I clutch the cold metal box against my chest, feeling the sharp edges dig into my skin through my shirt. I realized then that I wasn't digging up a memory. I was digging up a weapon. I spent my life protecting my son from the consequences of his own actions, shielding him from the world, from the law, from himself. But today, the protection ends. If you are listening to this, if you have a child who mistakes your kindness for weakness, who sees your love as a resource to be mined, stop digging their grave and start digging for the truth. Don't let guilt hold the shovel. Subscribe to this channel, listen to my story, because I am about to show you how a rusted box can bring down a tyrant who thinks he is untouchable. I wait until I see his silhouette move away from the kitchen window. I stand up, my knees cracking, and I carry the box to the potting shed at the back of the garden. It is my sanctuary, a place filled with the smell of peat moss and gasoline. I lock the door. I clear a space on the workbench. I pry the lid open with a flathead screwdriver. The seal holds for a second, stubborn with age, then gives way with a hiss of escaping air. The smell that wafts out is the smell of 1995, old paper, ink, and regret. The contents are dry. There is a newspaper from June 14, 1995. And a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. On the front of the envelope, in Eleanor's elegant looping cursive, are the words, "To be opened if Michael ever forgets who he is." I pick it up. My hands are trembling so badly I almost drop it. I break the seal. The wax cracks with a satisfying snap. I pull out the documents. It isn't a sentimental letter. It isn't a poem. It is a confession. But it isn't Eleanor's confession. It is Michael's. I read the document, the ink slightly faded but still legible. It details the night of June 14, 1995. The night Michael, then 25, drove his sports car drunk. The night he crashed into a storefront downtown. The night he fled the scene, leaving a witness who saw his face. It details the money he stole from our retirement fund, $40,000, to pay off that witness to keep quiet. It details the agreement we made in this very shed. We would cover his debt. We would keep him out of jail. We would save his future if he signed this document acknowledging the theft, the accident, and the payoff. And the clause, the terrible, necessary clause Eleanor insisted on. I, Michael Vance, agree that if I ever attempt to seize the Vance estate, coerce my parents, or act against their interests, this confession will be released to the police immediately, and my claim to any inheritance will be instantly and irrevocably voided. He thinks we burned it. He stood right there, next to the kiln, and watched us burn a stack of papers. He thought it was the original. It was a photocopy. We forgave, but we didn't forget. I read the second paper in the envelope. It is a codicil to my will, legally notarized by my old friend Judge Miller, stating that the activation of this confession triggers an automatic disinheritance clause, transferring all assets to the Historical Society. I sit on the wooden bench, the papers trembling in my hands. The grief hits me first, a wave of sorrow for the son we tried so hard to save, the son who forced us to keep a weapon buried in our garden for 30 years. Then the anger comes, cold and sharp. He is selling the house to pay off gambling debts. He is putting me in a home to silence me. He thinks the past is buried. He is wrong. The past just woke up, and it is holding a shovel. I fold the papers carefully and hide them in the inside pocket of my gardening jacket. I leave the empty box in the shed. I walk back to the house. I enter through the mud room, washing my hands in the utility sink. I scrub the dirt from under my nails. I look at myself in the mirror. I look old. I look tired, but my eyes are clear. I walk into the living room. Michael is standing there with a woman in a sharp blazer. She has a shark smile and a clipboard. "Dad," Michael says, his voice tight with annoyance. "This is Miss Sterling. She's here to finalize the listing. Go wash up. You look like a mess." Miss Sterling wrinkles her nose slightly, looking at my muddy boots. I look at him. I look at the son who sold his soul. "I will wash up," I say softly. Michael frowns. "I said I'll go change," I lie. I turn and walk toward the stairs. I have a suit to put on. I have a friend to call. And I have a letter to deliver. The dining room was a theater of lies, and Michael was the star performer. He had set the stage with meticulous cruelty. A bottle of Dom Perignon chilling in a silver bucket, 3 crystal flutes arranged in a mocking triangle, and a stack of glossy real estate brochures fanned out across the mahogany table like a winning hand of poker. This table was sacred ground. It was where Eleanor had served Christmas dinners for 40 years. It was where Michael had done his homework. Now, he had turned it into an auction block for my life. I walked into the room, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood. I had changed. Gone were the muddy gardening clothes. I was wearing my charcoal 3-piece suit, the one I used to wear for faculty hearings. It smelt faintly of cedar and mothballs, a scent of authority and preservation. I had shaved, the razor scraping away the gray stubble of the neglected old man Michael thought I was. I stood straight, forcing my spine to align despite the fire raging in my knees. "Dad," Michael sighed, rolling his eyes as he poured himself a glass of champagne. "You didn't have to dress up. It's just paperwork. We just need you to sign the power of attorney transfer so Miss Sterling can list the property. She has a buyer lined up. Cash offer." 10 days, I repeated, walking slowly to the head of the table. "That's fast." Miss Sterling, a woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde ambition, smiled at me. It was a shark smile, all teeth and no warmth. "The market is hot, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "And honestly, this house is too much for a man of your advanced years. The upkeep, the stairs. Michael is doing a noble thing, taking this burden off your shoulders." "Noble," I said, placing my hands flat on the table. Michael's jaw tightened. He set the glass down hard. "Don't start, Dad. We talked about this. You're confused. You forget to pay bills. You leave the stove on. You wander in the garden digging holes." "I haven't left the stove on since 1989, I said calmly. "And the bills are unpaid because you intercepted my mail, Michael." Michael stiffened. "He's having an episode," he said to the agent, reaching for the pen. "Just give me the paper. I have the medical proxy." "I wouldn't sign that if I were you," a voice said from the doorway. Michael spun around. Standing there, leaning on a cane but looking as formidable as a mountain, was Samuel Thorne, my attorney, my oldest friend. I had called him from the shed while I was reading the confession. "Michael!" demanded. "I am Silas's counsel," Samuel said, limping into the room with a heavy, rhythmic thud step. Michael laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "He was digging in the dirt earlier. He's senile." "I wasn't digging for worms, Michael," I said. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I felt the thick, cream-colored paper. It was warm from my body heat. I pulled out the envelope. The red wax seal was broken, the edges jagged, but the weight of the document was palpable. I slid the paper across the mahogany table. It hissed as it moved, stopping right in front of Michael's champagne glass. "Why?" I asked. Michael looked down. He sneered at first, expecting a senile rambling or an old grocery list. Then his eyes focused.
He saw the handwriting, his own from 30 years ago. He saw the date, June 14, 1995. I watched the color drain from his face. It started at his chin and went up to his hairline, leaving him pale and ghostly. His hand, which had been reaching for the champagne, froze in midair. "You said you burned this," he whispered. His voice was a strangled croak. "Mom said she burned it." "Your mother lied," I said. "She burned a photocopy. She wanted to protect you from the law, Michael, but she wanted to protect me from you. She knew one day you would come back." Miss Sterling asked, sensing the commission evaporating. "It is a confession," Samuel answered, stepping forward and opening his briefcase. "Signed by Michael Vance, admitting to the theft of $40,000 from the family trust and the hit-and-run accident he committed in 1995. Samuel pulled out a second document. "And this," Samuel said, "is the bad boy provision of the Vance family trust, a codicil triggered by the existence of this confession." Michael stood up, knocking his chair backward. It crashed to the floor. He screamed, his face twisting into a mask of ugly desperation. "That was 30 years ago. The statute of limitations—" "Expires when new evidence of fraud comes to light," Samuel corrected him coolly. "But the disinheritance, that's immediate. It's a contract, Michael. You signed it to stay out of jail. And the house? It's not yours to sell." I looked at my son. I tried to find the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders, the boy who used to catch fireflies in the jar. I searched his eyes for a flicker of remorse, of love, of anything human. I saw only greed and fear. It broke my heart, but it strengthened my spine. "The house stays with me," I said. He screamed, "I have nowhere to go. I owe people money, Dad. Dangerous people." "Then I suggest you get a job," I said. "Like a man." He shouted, grabbing the paper from the table. "I'll tear this up. I'll deny it." "That's a copy," I said calmly. "The original is in Samuel's safe. And the police are on their way to take a report about the elder abuse, the missing mail, the intimidation." Michael froze. He looked at the real estate agent, who was hurriedly packing her brochures into her bag, eager to escape the blast zone. He looked at Samuel, impassive as a statue. He looked at me. "Dad," he whimpered, the anger dissolving into pathetic fear. "Please, I'm your son. You can't send me to jail."
"You were my son," I said, my voice cracking for the first time, the grief finally bleeding through the anger. "Now you're just a lesson I finally learned." I pointed to the front door. Michael fled. He didn't pack a bag. He ran out the front door, the door he had tried to sell, and drove away in his leased car, tires screeching on the pavement. Miss Sterling scurried out after him, muttering apologies I didn't care to hear. The room fell silent. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked loudly. Samuel sighed and sat down in the chair Michael had vacated. He looked tired. "Michael?" he asked gently. I walked to the French doors and looked out at the garden. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. I saw the hole in the earth near the hydrangeas. It looked like a wound, raw and open. But wounds heal. "I will be," I said. I turned back to the table. I picked up the glass of champagne Michael had poured for himself. I walked over to the potted fern in the corner and poured the expensive wine into the dirt. "I will be," I repeated. I kept the house. I lived there for another 10 years, tending the garden, surrounded by the silence of a peace I had fought for. I never saw Michael again. He disappeared into the city, running from debts I refused to pay. But every time I passed the blue hydrangeas, I touched the petals and thanked Eleanor. She hadn't just planted flowers, she had planted a fail-safe. She had buried the truth in the dark earth, knowing that one day I would be strong enough to dig it up. And when the time came, the harvest saved my life.